Good afternoon and welcome to Hudson Institute and welcome to today's very special program. I'm Ken Weinstein, Japan Chair here at Hudson Institute, and delighted to especially want to give a very big thanks to our friends at the Mount Fuji Dialogue and especially Hidinaka Kato for helping us pull this event together with them during the Golden Week Mount Fuji Dialogue visit here in Washington, D.C. Our theme for today, as you know, is domestic politics, the U.S.-Japan alliance, and Tokyo's global role, a bipartisan view from the Japanese Diet. And as many of us know, the Ishiba government is Japan's first minority government in 3 decades, and its government is in office at a time of dynamic domestic and international challenges to examine major security, diplomatic, and economic issues. I'm delighted to welcome an all-star cast of Diet members, Koichiro Gemba, Itsunori Onodera, Shinijiro Koizumi, and Kimi Onoda from across the Japanese political spectrum to offer their perspectives on Japan and U.S.-Japan relations at this critical moment. Now we'll begin. I want to ask the Diet members to kindly take a seat on the stage, and we will begin momentarily. Now, the first Diet member we have the honor of hearing from is, of course, Koichiro Gemba, who is the Vice Speaker of the lower house of the Japanese Diet. He is an 11-term Diet member from Fukushima, and he is an independent. He was in the Constitutional Democratic Party until his election as Vice Speaker, and he's an old friend and delighted to welcome him to Hudson Institute. Mr. Vice Speaker.
Thank you. I am Koichiro Gemba. Thank you for that introduction. I am the Vice Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's difficult for me to talk about topics that have to do with the political situation. But looking at the paper, I saw bipartisan consensus, inter-party consensus, especially between the U.S. and Japan. Is there such a consensus or not? That is what I saw in advance. And I have 3 things to say on that subject. I believe that LDP believes the same as the Constitutional Democratic Party on this, but for Japan, the Trump administration has now been set up. But we have to have pride and advocate for the rule of law and free trade, universal values, to continue to advocate for them. We believe this continues to be the case, and I believe that is a multi-party consensus. Second point, even in Europe, it's said that the U.S. is inward-looking, only thinking about itself is not reliable. I think there are a lot of countries thinking this. For Japan, it will be important to try to make sure that the U.S. doesn't become even more isolationist and to try to strengthen U.S. involvement. This, too, is likely something that all of the parties, multiple parties in Japan, espouse. Third point, on the other hand, in the post-war period, the international order has existed, and when it comes to its revision, especially aspects pointed out by President Trump exist to some extent, but a revision of the burden carried by the United States vis-a-vis this order, how should we proceed? Japan should take initiative in thinking about this, we believe. Through such considerations, the international order using the issues of the Trump administration as an opportunity, we can be enthusiastic about trying to create an even more resilient international order. Thank you.
Thank you, former Foreign Minister Gemba. We now turn to Shinijiro Koizumi, who is the Chief Secretary of the Headquarters for Achieving a New Capitalism for the LDP. He's Director of the Standing Committee on Economics, Trade and Industry in the Diet. He is a 6-term Diet member from Kanagawa and, of course, the former Minister of the Environment. Koizumi.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you, Dr. Weinstein, for being a friend of Japan for so long and for providing us this opportunity today. I would also like to thank all of you who have joined us today and amidst this conversation on tariffs, where everyone is wondering what's going to happen. I believe that that's the context we find ourselves in. But as regards the tariffs, of course, I do think it represents a major challenge not only for Japan, but for the world, that America has provided such a challenge to us. But I think that it's also an opportunity for us to emphasize the strength of the U.S.-Japanese alliance. I think it has served as a catalyst for the U.S. to realize how important Japan is and how close our economic and security relationship is. It has served as a reminder for us. And so right now, Japan is the country that invests in the U.S. more than any other, and that has been the case over the past 5 years. So Japan has invested the most in Japan and has also created 100 million jobs, half of which are in manufacturing. And I have been working with Mr. Onodera, who is on our policy research committee, and I have been handling research into marine products. And there's not a wide awareness of this, but whereas Trump is very interested in the trade deficit, as regards agriculture and marine products, there's actually a trade surplus that the U.S. has with Japan. And so when we think about this, and it gives us an opportunity to revisit our views on the U.S.-Japan relationship. And the day after tomorrow, Minister Akazawa will be coming to Washington for the second round of tariff negotiations. And President Trump and Secretary Bessent have continuously been sending out positive messages about Japan and the relationship between President Japan and Prime Minister Ishiba. As regards that topic, many people still remember the relationship President Trump had with Abe, so people were quite concerned, but there was a very good atmosphere at the first summit. And so I think that this is an opportunity to make the alliance even more solid and also to identify fields where we can step up our collaboration. One is shipbuilding, I believe. I see that as a domain that President Trump is very interested in, and recently the Secretary of the Navy has also proposed creating dual usage vessels with Japan. And both U.S. Navy vessels and dual-use vessels could be built in Japan or repaired in Japan. And also, perhaps the Japanese could invest in American shipbuilding facilities. I see that as a possibility. So, long story short, I believe that the tariffs are a major topic, but it is one that could highlight the roles that Japan could play in the world. And even if it involves some difficulties, we still need to remember to be forward-looking in setting our agendas, because if the relationship between the U.S. and Japan should become difficult, or that between the U.S. and Europe were to become difficult, you have to think of who that will make copy. It's a clear answer. It will be certain countries, and we must not be overly reliant on any specific countries. And so we need to be unwavering in the U.S. and Japan, and have been, about the issues that China represents. And President Trump talks about making America great again, MAGA. But I would like to say that we should make the alliance great always. That's what I'd like MAGA to stand for. And so that's a message that I would like to send out from Japan.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for that very clear message. Mr. Koizumi, it's now a pleasure to hear from a longtime friend of Hudson Institute, an old friend of mine, two-time former Defense Minister Itsunori Onodera. He is chairperson of the Policy Research Council, an incredibly important body in the LDP. He is also chairman of the Committee on the Budget and the Diet, which is also an incredibly awe-inspiring set of responsibilities, and he's an 8-term Diet member from Yagi. Onodera-sensei, please.
選出は9回になります。
It'll be my ninth, it's the nine times I've been elected. I met you first 15 years ago, Mr. Weinstein. With Prime Minister Abe, I visited the Hudson Institute and had a talk with you. That was the first time I met you. At the time, the LDP was in the opposition. Now, we are now a minority party in power. And so even the passing of a budget requires a lot of work. In 150 years, it's the first time that we were able to get a budget passed within the end of the year, even though we had a minority government. Thank you very much for that help, Mr. Gemba. So on the Trump tariff question, it was a terrible shock at the beginning for us, especially for Japan vis-a-vis US. We have invested heavily and have created a lot of jobs. We thought that this relationship was a real win-win. But with tariffs, Japan was treated the same. Different than some other countries, Japan has not taken countermeasures of retaliatory tariffs. We have said that we will negotiate to try to seek a win-win. This is the basic stance of the Ishiba government. So we've come to Washington in order to try to have talks to find a win-win that will help both of us. And we'd like to be able to go home with a sense of what is important, having heard various views. Further, about security, I have a concern. The U.S. had been cooperating for the stability of East Asia in the security field with China in mind. In that context, the Trump tariffs affect both Japan and China, but there's a danger that high tariff rates could be applied to Asian countries. Up to now, there are many countries in Asia that have taken a China policy similar to that of Japan and the US, but their feelings are very unstable now because of these tariffs. There's a danger they might become more distant and become closer to China. This is not something that Japan wants either. Japan would like to play a role in this tariff question to first find a solution via negotiation, and second, with Asian countries, have solid negotiations with the U.S. to make sure that we can all continue to enjoy good relations. I think Japan has a very big role to play here. Another point, recently in the security discussion, there is an area where Japan changed its policy greatly, allowing export of Japanese defense equipment to other countries and allowing joint development. Up to now, defense equipment had to be used domestically. That was our basic stance. We now have a more open framework where it's possible to collaborate. For example, the US and Japan could co-manufacture, co-develop defense items, and we can go about proactively deploying them in like-minded countries. There will be a lot of discussion with President Trump, and we have to be proactive in bringing up the fact that Japan is active on many fronts and contributing on many fronts. In the invasion of Ukraine, it's important to see that it's important when it comes to defense equipment, particularly to have enough ammunition. It became very clear that otherwise you can't continue a fight. A research organization in the Republic of Korea found that half of Russian ammunition used in the Ukraine war was supplied by North Korea. And that North Korea received quite a lot of payment from Russia for that. The balance in Asia is getting out of whack. North Korea is getting stronger. It may become an arms exporting country. Russia and North Korea have become closer. China, further, is already pressuring Taiwan heavily. In early April, China carried out large-scale military exercises. The security situation is very delicate. In that context, Japan is all the more eager to quickly resolve the tariff question in a win-win fashion in such a way that it contributes positively to security.
Thank you very much, Minister Onodera. Our last speaker is new to Hudson Institute. We're delighted to have Kimi Onoda, who is a member of the House of Councilors from Okayama Prefecture. She is chair of the Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee in the Upper House. She's a former parliamentary vice minister of defense and is vice chair of the LDP Policy Research Council, and we're delighted to welcome you. Look forward to hearing your insights.
This is my first time in my whole life to take part in this, but this is not the first question. We're still having free discussion, right? Yes, you can say whatever's on your mind. Okay. Thank you for that. I am from the House of Councilors. My name is Kimi Onoda, and everyone else on the stage has been a minister before, so I'm wondering why someone like me is on the stage with them. But my father was American, and I was born in Chicago, Illinois. And when I was 1 year old, I moved to Okayama Prefecture in Japan, and then I grew up in Japan after that. So I never lived in the U.S. Even a year. But I was serving as the vice minister of parliamentary vice minister. I apologize, vice minister of defense, and I took part in the honor guard and gave a speech there, and that was something that made me feel a lot of things. This was in Iwo and so I really wanted to. It made me feel like we really need to think about the nature of the alliance. And everyone's already talked on the tariff subject, but just as the other members have said, up until now, as regards defense as an example, or excuse me, trade as an example, if China has always used trade if there was something it didn't like refusing to export rare metals, or if Australia said anything about to Taiwan, they said they wouldn't import beef or wine from them. So they have always used imports and exports. And we partners who share democratic values have tried to help each other. And we have realized that relying on China represents China a risk. And so we're trying to diversify our supply chains, and all of these partners that share these values have tried to work together. So against that backdrop, to have risks now associated with the U.S. as regards imports and exports is something that makes me a little bit sad, actually. And up until now, the U.S. has established the global rules and leadership on the world stage, which I think is very precious. And so I understand and think it's great that Trump wants to revisit the current order, but you need the world to think that trading with America or being connected with America or having security interests with America is not a risk, but a benefit, and that is the correct path to pursue, because if you can't get the world to think that, then it will be impossible to defend the international order. The democracies are those that are becoming the minority rather than the majority in the world. And so we partners that share values need to connect with each other without a risk, because that is going to be very important for the world. And that's what I hope to share with all of you today, so that we can make good choices going forward. Thank you.
Not bad for a debut. Thank you very much, Onoda-sensei. Thank you. Let me throw a few questions out for the audience, for the Diet members, and then I'll open it up to the audience in a bit. And I just want to make sure that everybody who needs translation devices has them. Everybody's good. Okay, great. So first, let me turn to you, former Foreign Minister Gemba. And let me get a sense from you. There used to be an expression in the United States that sort of foreign policy stops at the national border, that we used to be unified in our vision of foreign policy. That's no longer the case. And I was wondering in Japan if you see a cross-party consensus on Prime Minister Ishiba's overall strategies, not everything that he does, but just broadly on the strategies that he's undertaking on foreign policy. Thank you.
今回のですね、
Looking at tariffs, I think Japan is becoming more consensual, more bipartisan. We have a minority government. Even despite that, we were able to get a budget passed within the fiscal year, as my colleague, Representative Onodera, has said. I think that the opposition party's responsibility is they're being held responsible. That was for the budget, and I think that's true also for foreign policy. So, former Prime Minister Noda, who heads the Constitutional Democratic Party, is saying that this is a national difficulty. And so his position is not to criticize Prime Minister Ishiba, but to hit him in the back end. Also, about overall strategies for security and building up defenses. The Constitutional Democratic Party is more on the side of defense buildups, especially increasing the defense budget. Negative. That's the impression. You have the impression that Constitutional Democrats are against that, I believe. However, the largest opposition party, the Constitutional Democratic Party, were they actually against that? No, we have a consensus in favor of increasing the defense budget. Also, for the counterstrike capability within our party, it was a very tough argument. At the time, I was the research committee chairman. But there were some conditions, such as purely defensive use. If those conditions were met, our party came out in favor of counterstrike capabilities and holding long-range missiles. So when it comes to diplomacy and security, I think that multi-party consensus is almost without a doubt easier to achieve now than it was in the past.
Thank you. Let me now turn to former Minister Onodera and ask, what do you think the top priorities should be for the Japanese government in relation to Trump 2.0? I mean, you obviously talked about tariffs, but what other priorities would you have? Thank you.
I think really the U.S.-Japan cooperation in security and our roles for stability in East Asia are where it's at. The U.S. is the most important presence for us. And within the Trump tariff process, I'm concerned that U.S. international engagement may suffer from a poorer position when you consider that USAID, that its aid has been halted, vaccine provision, food provision. By this being cut off, developing countries could see damage to the health and the food supply for their children. I hope that quickly the U.S. will change position on areas other than tariffs. If it takes a lot of time, then perhaps Japan should be proactive in providing assistance. This might be something that should be Japan's role. Within the U.S., within the international community, I think that the position of the U.S. is strongest when it engages with the rest of the world, and we will send that message through diplomatic channels.
Thank you. Let me now turn to former Environment Minister Koizumi. Given what President Trump is arguing with the America First policies, how does this, and this sort of feeds on to what Minister Onodera just said, how does this feed on to the roles that Japan can and should play in the international arena? Do you think Japan's role is changing as a result?
Firstly, President Trump and his America First policy is something that I think as an independent country is a given. You should be pursuing something like that. Japan should also be Japan first and pursue its interests, and I think that applies for every country. And President Trump has been hoping to help people who have been left behind. And I think that that is also correct. And right now in Japan as well, there are people that we did not place enough spotlight on, or domains that we did not place enough spotlight on. And so the people are hoping that we step up our policies in that sense. And so this is not a phenomenon confined to the US. I think that globally, the democracies are struggling with this. And Onoda-san mentioned a moment ago that if you look out globally, that democracies are fewer in number and that there are more countries that are undemocratic. That is correct. And President Trump is trying to definitely achieve a new international order, but at the same time, you have countries like China that are not democratic, and that group is also hoping to get rid of the world where the US, Japan, and the G7 made the rules and created their own rules. And so against that backdrop, what is it that Japan should do? I think that that is what we have to understand. And in that context, I believe that we should be working with President Trump to see what Japan can do to establish these new rules. And one avenue of that would be the UN. I don't think that President Trump likes the UN, but Japan also doesn't think that the UN is fine as it is, especially as regards the Security Council. There needs to be reform. If you look at the US-Russia war, you can realize that the permanent members of the Security Council have a veto, and now we know what impact that has. And if there were a Taiwan contingency, it could turn out that we witnessed the same sort of thing happening. And so we need to work together to reform the UN. Up until now, the US presidents would probably have preferred to keep the UN as it was. But I think that President Trump would probably say, okay, let's work on it together. There is that possibility. And then also the WTO and other aspects of international trade need to be rebuilt. And I think that the WTO really needs to be reformed. At any rate, I think that the US and Japan could work together to make better and more fair and stable and sustainable rules for the world. We could make proposals. And I think that Japan should make more proposals to the US.
Thank you very much. Let me now turn to Onoda and to Upper House Member Onoda and ask her what she thinks should be Japan's steps to focus more on maintaining peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific. What concrete steps should Japan take, do you think?
Well, for example, as regards the islands, I think that we've established a relationship with Australia, and so we should address the issue of the southern islands, but also ASEAN is very important. And it's very difficult in terms of how to engage with ASEAN. I was previously the parliamentary vice minister of defense, and I made a speech at a conference on behalf of the minister, and this was when and Russia was also there, and I was the only person on the West side that talked about what Russia was doing to Ukraine, and China has also done so much to change the status quo, but I, from Japan, was also the only one to complain about China. And so we need to establish what it is worth being alert about or having a sense of crisis about, because even if we know that, sometimes we think about our trade partners and other connections that we have with them. In the case of Ukraine, the energy supply has kept Europe from taking more actions. So we can't decide what to do on the security front because of these other interests. And I think that ASEAN has been struggling with this, but working hard on this as well. And I apologize for putting it this way, but I think that the Western countries have talked about the rule of law and the equality and things like that, the shared values. And I understand that well, but they've been very pushy about it. And the democracies are no longer the majority. And so some countries might not like to hear that. They want to work with you, but if they're going to have those values pushed on you, then they can't join hands hands with you in some cases. And in Japan is probably more acknowledging of the variety of values out there than most countries. So we can help a lot of countries. Even with ODA, we can't say we're going to give this to you and just push it on them. We go there and find out what it is that they really want and help them so that they can help themselves. That's how Japanese ODA works. And Japan has OSA, which is Official Security OSA. I don't know what the English word was. Assistance. Thank you for that. And that is providing defense equipment to other countries. For example, we've provided radar sites for the Philippines, and we've transferred this equipment to them. But the people who are going to be working there have come to Japan so that the self-defense forces could train them as well, and then we deliver the equipment to them. And so people don't want to have something shoved on them. They want to realize that you really care about what it is that they want and that they understand and are trying to work with you on that. And so that is something that Japan is capable of. And so, if it's a group, then if it's difficult to share a philosophy within a group, then you need to have something a looser circle where you're working together, and then whether it be in terms of trade or the economy or what have you, not to be reliant on China and establish more of a relationship with one another. I think that that's a type of assistance that Japan, and maybe only Japan, could supply.
Very good. Thank you very much. I've got 4 more questions before we open it up for the panel. Let me throw one out to each of the panelists. First, let me begin with former Minister of Foreign Affairs Gemba. A key aspect of the U.S.-Japan bilateral trade imbalance arguably comes from Japan's low level of consumption compared to the United States. Do you see this as a place where the United States and Japan, differ about how Japan should grow its economy? Are there areas in Japan, as you think about economic growth in Japan, that should be prioritized, whether it be the development sector, the startup sector, overseas investments, or cutting-edge technologies? How do you see it from your perspective? Thank you.
I think this topic, the U.S.-Japan trade account, Japan has a surplus, the U.S. has a deficit. And that's because of low demand domestically in Japan. I think that was the suggestion. I don't think that's the only factor, but it may be one. So Japan's domestic demand, up to now, its productivity has been was steadily rising. Unfortunately, wages and investment did not result from that. Wages stagnated. Real wages were stagnating for a long time. Corporate savings, financial assets per capita of households are the best they've ever been, at record levels. So what's the biggest issue at hand? I think this is also bipartisan. We should raise wages. If that succeeds, Japan's domestic demand should improve. That alone is not the only reason behind the trade surplus we have with the U.S.
Great. Okay, thank you. Let me turn to former Minister Onodera and ask you, you were one of the Diet members really who led the charge on the 3 strategic documents that were released in December of 2022 that led to that have, has led to the doubling of defense spending by 2027. Now the creation, I guess, of an offensive cyber capability, increased cybersecurity, increased information security, and the like. Wanted to get your sense of how you see the progress so far and the progress moving forward in that area. Thank you.
まず防衛、国家安全保障戦略を
The national security strategy was newly drafted. Our defense strategy was drafted. And a specific defense buildup plan was created. We succeeded in doing this. And Japan's counterstrike capability was therefore approved by the government of Japan, and it's become quite possible for us to export defense items. Cybersecurity new legislation is expected soon. Monitoring and active cyber defense in the cyberspace. Things such as these were not possible up to now, but they will become possible. I think that our capability is quite a bit being improved. In Trump 1, I was a defense minister. We promised to increase our defense budget, and we have done so continuously. But one has to consider that Ukraine and Gaza and the Mideast, Israel, if you look at the war situations there, defense capability buildup that was decided just a few years ago, is it going to be okay just as it is, or should it be sped up? Or should new fields be prioritized, such as drones? Cognitive domain. The battle space is getting larger, and especially the cognitive domain is important. We are being attacked by China in Japan now, in Okinawa. Vis-a-vis several media outlets, several papers, articles have been sent to Okinawa saying that the Ryukyus were never part of Japan. They used to be part of China, that they used to be strongly under the control of trauma. A lot of new papers are being published in this area on this topic in China and being sent around the world. And experimentally, the Senkaku Islands, a friend of mine asked DeepSeek, which was Chinese, and DeepSeek said it is inherent Chinese territory. A Japanese citizen or an American citizen well-versed in Japanese affairs would know this is a lie. But if this kind of AI becomes internationally used, many people may not know. They might actually believe that it was originally Chinese and that Japan is trying to occupy it. False messages could spread. A request we have for our ally, the US, is that China is engaging in cognitive warfare in various areas vis-a-vis Africa. They're saying, for example, the Chinese were the first to discover America. It will be very dangerous for us if we don't pay attention to this field, and we should think of it as a battle domain.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister Onodera. Let me ask Foreign Minister Koizumi about your father, when he was Prime Minister, had a very close relationship with George W. Bush. Of course, Prime Minister Abe had an incredibly close relationship with President Trump. As you look at the way that these personal relationships affect policy. How would you think a future prime minister should think about these kinds of personal relationships with the U.S. president? How, you know?
まあ、トランプ大統領
Well, President Trump makes this point particularly important, that's for sure. And since I've been in the US this time, people have been asking me how the chemistry was between Prime Minister Ishiba and President Trump, but I think that the relationship between Prime Minister Abe and President Trump and that between Prime Minister Ishiba and President Trump is something that should not be compared directly. That's not fair. The reason for that is that when Prime Minister Abe was in office, President Trump still had no political experience. And for that reason, he wanted to hear from Prime Minister Abe and learn from him. I think that it was a relationship of that nature. But now, President Trump has 4 years under his belt as president and is more confident. And so against that backdrop, meanwhile, he's engaging with Prime Minister Ishiba, who's just become prime minister. So it's not the same kind of relationship. But when the interlocutors change, then so does the style of communication. And also how you go about building the relationship also changes. And I think that it's fine for each different set of people to have their own style. It's not that everyone needs to play golf. I mean, maybe it is better to play golf. It might be better for you, but there should be another approach available to you as well. And so I think that, first of all, Prime Minister Ishiba loves to work. He's all about work. So, first of all, he wants to tackle the negotiation right in front of us. Secretary Bessent has been conveying a very positive messaging about 3 countries, Japan, South Korea, and India. And those 3 countries in the negotiations are being treated with high priority. And so I think that by achieving good deals, that they will realize that he is someone who can do his work, or we will both see each other as people who can get the job done, meaning that even if you don't play golf, you can still have a good relationship built, and that any way that you go about that is fine. I think that's important to recognize. But as you are well aware, Dr. Weinstein, President Trump and many people in his administration that are familiar with Japan, there are many people like that, and it's important to have good relationships with them. So it's not all just about the heads of state. And I think that the history that we have up until now, the networks that we've established, are the reason that we've been able to come here with this cross-party delegation this time as well. So that really highlights the importance of the person-to-person relationships. And I met Ambassador Glass last week, and he and his family have a long-held connection with Japan, and 17 members of the U.S. Congress sent a letter to President Trump about how he should place priority on the North Korean abduction issue. And one of those Congress members was someone who had been in the JET program and come to Japan on that. And so that shows that no matter the conditions, the U.S. and Japan need to continue to maintain these person-to-person relationships, and that's something that doesn't just apply to the heads of state.
Thank you very much. And let me throw the last question that I'm offering to Upper House Member Onoda. We're obviously in Japan, as here in the United States, we're looking nervously at the South Korean elections and not knowing which direction it's going to go. Obviously, with President Yoon, we had a president who was favorable to the United States, who was favorable to Japan, who was willing to take huge political risks in order to improve the bilateral relationship with Japan and the trilateral relationship with the United States. How in Tokyo there's so much uncertainty about the Korean elections in terms of who the candidates will be? What are your concerns about the South Korean elections? Thank you.
That's the
question you really shouldn't have asked me. I don't know what to say.
改善されてると言っても韓国はやっぱり上に立つ人がある程度反日的な発言をしとかないと
the
国民の世論
people.
が持たないっていうような変な国柄なのでなかなか難しい。
South Korea is a little bit odd because the politicians can't get popularity unless they make anti-Japan comments. But frankly speaking, they're aware of the importance of the U.S.-Japan relationship, and that's the reason that we were able to, even though we weren't all right with, we acted like we were all right with the radar issue with South Korea. But even if we make a really good relationship over 4 years with them, once the administration changes in South Korea, the next administration might say that they don't know anything about what happened transpired then. And so I don't have any definite evidence that anything we built up over 4 years would last beyond that. So I would personally say that we need to get on by ourselves without relying on them. See, I told you shouldn't have asked me. Could someone follow up on that for me, please? Someone else might say that I was wrong.
I apologize for asking you the question. Well, now I'll turn it to the audience then for questions. And let me turn it let me first turn it. I see there's a reporter over there, Felicia Schwartz with Politico. If you get a microphone to her. And then I've seen the other hands go up, but that was the first hand I saw go up.
Thanks, Ken, and thank you for doing this. I think this is probably for Mr. Onodera and Mr. Koizumi. When you're talking to the Trump team, do you feel that they are willing to negotiate about not just the 24% tariff, but the 10% tariff and tariffs on automobiles and aluminum and steel and all of that, everything beyond that? And then I think just secondly, do you feel that you have a good grasp of what the U.S. end game is for the talks?
Good question.
Great. Great.
現実に一番初め
The first tariffs on steel and aluminums, actually, it's tough to manufacture them domestically in the U.S. So the 25% tariff would just be a cost that the U.S. consumer would have to bear. In the same way, we have concerns about U.S. prices rising. Listening to various people talk, the average U.S. consumer, when they go to the supermarket, will find many items from China. Now, in a few months, either the prices would go up or the products would disappear if high tariffs were implemented. A lot of people are telling us this. I am the head of the LDP's office to try to take measures against this. And it impressed me what someone from the battery industry told me. 20% of what they export to the U.S. is to Japanese companies in the U.S. The other 80% is to U.S. automakers. If 25% tariffs come into effect on the 3rd, this will make manufacturing very costly for Detroit manufacturers. So the effects of the tariffs are very tough, not just for Japan, but various effects could arise within the U.S. as well. So that's why we want to make effort to quickly, such that we can fix this and avoid the tariffs. We think it's very important to make efforts to that end. It's tough for the Japanese public to have the tariffs, but in the long run, this will result in higher prices for the American consumers, and something we have to understand.
同じです。
Same.
Narimura over here.
Hi, thank you so much, Ken, again, and thank you all to the speakers. It's great and very reassuring to hear that there's a bipartisan consensus that the importance of U.S.-Japan security alliance is still at the cornerstone of our alliance. And with that being said, my question is, in terms of the Minister Akazawa's negotiation coming up in 2 days, can we expect that the negotiation will also be include the U.S.-Japan security alliance in some form or some way to better leverage and come out to a great deal? Or is it that we wish or we hope that Trump will not mention about the security alliance and hope that that won't be brought to the table? Just want to get the sense of what you all think the outcome of the U.S.-Japan security alliance will be in terms of this negotiation. Thank you.
赤澤大臣が、
Minister Akazawa, representing the U.S., the Japanese government, will soon arrive in Washington. Negotiations are carried out by the government, so we and the Diet do not comment. What we hope, though, is that on this tariff question, the negotiations will conclude in such a fashion that will be a win-win for the U.S. and for Japan, for security as well.
Thank you so much. Atari Parashar here working at the Asia Group. My quick question is to Gemba Sensei. About there are rumors going around that CDP is trying to raise a no confidence motion against Prime Minister Ishiba. So taking into account the how volatile the situation is, do you think those rumors are true? How far is this gonna happen, and are you thinking of it before the upper house election?
Nobody knows. ましてや僕は今副議長と議長が
Well, I am vice speaker. The vice speaker and the speakers are supposed to be non-factional and are not allowed to comment on this kind of question. On the others, former Prime Minister Noda, I would guess, I don't think he has decided as to whether a motion of no confidence should be brought up.
Sorry, I'm asking question in Japanese if you don't mind.
My name is Yokoyama from Bloomberg, and I have come from Tokyo to cover Minister Akazawa's visit, and I'd like to ask Mr. Onodera. You mentioned there was some question about whether security would be brought up during Minister Akazawa's visits, but do you think that the Diet should consider increasing the defense budget or the covering the costs of the U.S. forces in Japan? If you were asked that, what do you think that you would answer? If you're going to establish a win-win relationship, there's the topic of the joint development of defense equipment that you mentioned earlier, but if there's some other way to establish a win-win relationship, what do you think it would be?
So on your first question, I don't think I can answer with a hypothetical. On your second question, the security situation is so tough now. On top of that, we have tariffs. The US and Japan and all the countries in the West, I think even, are a bit wavering. In order to not send a wrong message, I think US-Japan are okay, should conduct visible joint trilateral defense training.
今ちょっと話聞いてるときに思い出したことがあって、 昔、
I just remembered that your father, Mr. Koizumi, gave a speech at the UN, and after that, I had the chance to help him. And he had a press conference after that, and there were only Japanese press members there. And listening to what was just said, I think that maybe the issue lies somewhere else. It's similar here today. Almost all the media here is Japanese, and almost all the attendees are Japanese. So the issue is not things as concrete as the tariffs, but it wasn't until the pandemic that I left Japan for the first time. It was for a year, and I realized that you don't see news about Japan or Japan talked about at all. And I think that one issue is the language barrier. So I don't think the issues are so granular. I think that Japan and its message doesn't get conveyed, and that this is something that we don't realize. But I think that if we were to focus on this more, it would resolve the more granular problems for us. And it's difficult to say this, but both in the morning and afternoon sessions, most of the attendees and media have been Japanese. And Prime Minister Ishiba's grandfather was famous, and he was a famous pastor, and he was friends with Billy Graham, and I think that if that had been brought up with Trump, that would have made a major difference. So I think that the Japanese language acts as a handicap for us. And so we need to put more efforts into our communication, I believe. If that's something that we worked on harder, then I think that we would be able to get beyond the language barrier and convey what's good about Japan. What do you think about that? Thank you. Thank you for that. Communication is always important. And Dr. Weinstein also mentioned this, that we always need to be thinking about how Japan can best convey the message that it has. That's something we should always be working to improve. And also, it's not just about the English language. There are other important factors. We are speaking in Japanese right now, but as Japanese people, we should be able to use our language and our culture and our traditions and be proud of those. And so each of us is responsible for our own country and should have patriotism in our hearts as we engage with other countries, so that even if we have differences of opinions of them, they will also respect us. That's very important for diplomacy. And you mentioned my father, but my father and President Bush at the time we're not always speaking to each other in English. And also Prime Minister Abe and President Trump always had interpreters with them so that they did not misunderstand each other. And in that context, they were able to develop a very special relationship with one another. So I think that language is important, as you say, but communication takes place through a diversity of forms. And so that's something that we also need to understand and try to get as many people as possible to understand the value of Japan and understand get the U.S. to understand that we are a win-win partner. Thank you for that.
I will note, by the way, the majority of people asking questions are not Japanese. And the audience, aside from the delegation traveling with Mount Fujiyasu, it's not all Japanese, as you indicated.
Yes, hello. I'm going to speak in English. Sorry about that. So I'm curious to ask you, what role can Japan play in terms of J alert systems? So, as you know, there's a lot of calamities that happen in Japan, and Japan has a very good system on how to deal with it, especially the rubber mats used, and the ground level structural work is just brilliant. I mean, so what can Japan do to help Florida or Alaska, where a lot of calamities happen? Like, given how good your system is, even though you're under 3 tectonic plate borders, but still, I'm amazed. I have to clap on it. So, what can Japan do on that level for U.S.?
すごくいいポイントだと思います。小野田さんからも後でもしも。
I think that's a very good point. I would like to ask Ms. Onoda to speak to this as well. But for example, we have cell phones, and in Japan, if there is an earthquake, then we get an urgent alert on our cell phones. And of course, sometimes they're not right. They're not right sometimes, but being told that you're about to experience an earthquake through this really loud sound is something that really helps us. And I think that Japan is the only country in the world that has that. And so we should think about how we could collaborate with other countries. And in terms of architecture as well, we do have a seismic technology. And so how we could share that with other countries is something that we could collaborate on with the U.S. In the future. We're talking here about disaster readiness. And the 2011 earthquakes was something that serves as the catalyst for the Tomodachi operation, but we could also have private sector collaboration and develop this there. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, go there and there. We have time for 2 more questions. Yeah.
I'll
be asking a question in Japanese. I'm studying international relations in the master's course at George Washington, and I am still a student, so I don't know a lot, but please bear with me. I think that Trump and Xi will probably be negotiating with each other, but if you look at what Trump did in the first administration, it's kind of unpredictable. I think that probably that there is things that can be done in terms of security, but do you think that some compromise might be reached without Japan's involvement? And also, how do you think Japan should go about maintaining its resilience? Could you tell me what you're thinking right now?
非常に微妙な質問です。ただいろいろなことについて常に
That's a really delicate question, but diplomacy, economic sanctions we have in place, if there is, we want to make sure that there will be no quick changes, abrupt changes, and be prepared. Economic security is becoming more and more important. Not for a particular country, but so that our supply chains will be prepared for any eventuality. And also, our information security is also something that we have to pay attention to.
Okay, last question.
ジョンズ・ホプキンス大学シニアフェローの堂田愛子でございます。
I'm a senior fellow from Johns Hopkins, and I would, a moment ago, Mr. Onodera mentioned the dismantling of USAID and the fact that it was closed. And in Asia and Africa, there's now a vacuum created by the absence of the US, and who is going to enter into that space is a big issue. And Japan thinks of human security as a pillar of its security policy. So as an ally of the US, in order to strengthen the international order, what kind of contribution could Japan make?
サイスご出身。
Are you from SAIS? I used to be at SAIS a long time ago.
実は日本は人間の安全保障の基金という形で資金提供を今までやっておりました。
Japan has been providing funds for human security, and we should continue to do so. USAID is a pressing issue. We have to seek for a US-Japan win-win in this area as well. I think Japan should pay attention to this area of international aid as well. Earlier, Mr. Onoda was also saying this, but Japan provides aid, but a characteristic of Japan's aid is that we take into consideration the other country's stance. USAID had a huge amount of aid. Japan's finances, frankly, I think, would not permit us to fill that gap. So we shouldn't try to overextend ourselves, but we can do what we do best. Sadako Ogawa, whom I respect, has said, and this is also bipartisan, taking good care of the dignity of human beings to continue to provide aid is something that she's spoken up for, and we certainly support that.
Any other comments now? Any other
さっ
comments?
きやらかしちゃったから黙ってた方がいいかな。
Since the mess I made of it earlier, I thought I'd better shut up. But I'll just say one thing. This wasn't something we discussed today, but in terms of security, I think that the labor supply is going to be very important. We talked about earthquakes just now, and also you were talking about rubber mats. I think you're talking about anti-seismic rubber mats. But Japan is lacking in people, especially engineers. And so whether you're building defense equipment or seismic equipment, we really need to give better compensation to specialists in those fields. And so I think people really don't talk about security from the perspective of labor supply, but I think that that's part of economic security. And when we had the earthquake in 2011, lots of foreigners living in Japan left Japan. So when there's some contingency, we need people to stay in Japan. And so we need to train people. And I've spoken with people in Europe about this as well, but people, they were saying that they don't have enough engineers for their manufacturing sector as well. So we need to start thinking about labor supply as part of security. So those of us who share the common values need to work on this together, or else we could see our labor supply taken away from us as well. So that's something else that we need to work on. That's just my view.
That is also a problem we face here in the United States. Look, I want to offer heartfelt thanks to our extraordinary group of panelists. I have members Gemba, Onodera, Koizumi, and Onoda. I very much hope that we will be able to welcome all of you back, especially Onoda-san.
Sorry, so sorry.
I want to thank our friends at the Mount Fuji Dialogue for making this possible. I want to thank my Japan chair colleagues, Deputy Director Will Chu in particular, and also Research Associate Iko Tsujihiro on this, our translator, and especially the Hudson Institute communications team that worked so hard to pull this event together. Thank you so much, and have a wonderful rest of your trip here.
Thank you.